In late March 1922, in the remote Bavarian countryside of Germany, approximately 70 kilometers north of Munich, stood a solitary farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. The name itself, meaning behind Kaifeck, aptly described its isolated location tucked behind a small hamlet near the edge of dense forest land. This lonely farm would become the site of one of Germany's most notorious and baffling unsolved murder cases. The 6 victims were Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's children Cecilia, aged 7, and Josef, aged 2, and the maid Maria Baumgartner. In the months before the murders, a series of unsettling events began to unfold at the farm. 6 months prior to the murders, the family's previous maid, Crescens Rieger, had abruptly quit her position. She later claimed that she had heard strange noises in the attic and believed the house was haunted. This would prove to be an ominous foreshadowing of what was to come. In March 1922, Andreas Gruber discovered a strange newspaper from Munich on his property. What made this particularly disturbing was that neither he nor anyone in his family subscribed to this newspaper. When he questioned the local postman, the man denied delivering it. Further investigation revealed that no one in the vicinity received that particular paper. Days before the killings, Andreas told neighbors about discovering footprints in the fresh snow that led from the dark forest directly to the farm's machine room. But disturbingly, no footprints led back out. Andreas also found that the doors locked to the machine room had been broken. Despite thoroughly searching the house and surrounding buildings, he found no intruder. That same night, the family reported hearing unsettling footsteps in the attic. A search turned up nothing. Despite these alarming occurrences, Andreas refused offers of help from neighbors and critically did not report any of these incidents to the police. According to a school friend of 7-year-old Cecilia Gabriel, the young girl had reported that her mother Victoria had fled the farm the night before the murders after a violent quarrel, only to be found hours later in the forest. This detail adds another layer of mystery to the events leading up to the tragedy. On the afternoon of Friday, March 31, 1922, Maria Baumgartner arrived at Hinterkaifeck to begin her employment as the family's new maid. She was escorted to the farm by her sister, who departed shortly after helping Maria settle in. This sister would be the last person known to have seen any of the Hinterkaifeck residents alive. Tragically, Maria had worked at the farm for only a single day before the murders occurred. Sometime between the evening of March 31st and the early hours of April 1st, 1922, a horrifying massacre took place at Hinterkaifeck. Based on the evidence gathered, investigators believe that the perpetrator first lured 4 of the residents, Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and Victoria's daughter Cecilia, one by one into the barn through the stable. There, using a mattock, also known as a grub axe, a hand tool used for digging, prying and chopping, similar to the pickaxe, the killer brutally struck each victim in the head, killing them. After murdering the 4 victims in the barn, the killer proceeded to enter the farmhouse. Inside, they found and killed the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, in her bedroom. Maria was still wearing the clothes from her first and only day of work at the farm when she was murdered. Finally, the killer entered Victoria's bedroom, where 2-year-old Joseph was sleeping in his crib. The toddler was killed in the same manner as the others, with blows to the head from the mattock. What makes the Hinterkaifeck case particularly chilling is evidence suggesting that the murderer did not flee the scene after committing the brutal killings. Instead, the perpetrator appears to have remained at the farm for several days following the murders. During this time, the killer fed the cattle and other farm animals, consumed food from the kitchen, eating the family's bread, and cutting meat from the pantry. maintained fires in the house's fireplace as smoke was seen rising from the chimney in the days after the murders. The murderer essentially continued the daily operations of the farm as though nothing had happened, living alongside the corpses of their victims. 4 days passed between the murders and the discovery of the bodies. On April 1st, coffee sellers Hans and Eduard Shirovsky arrived at Hinterkaifeck to take an order. When no one responded to their knocks, they walked around the property but found no one present. They noticed the gate to the machine house was open and then decided to leave. Young Cecilia Gabriel was absent from school without excuse for several days, and the family failed to appear for Sunday church services, raising concerns in the community. On April 4th, mechanic Albert Hoffner went to Hinterkaifeck to repair an engine. He later stated that he had not seen any family members and had heard nothing except the sounds of the farm animals and the dog inside the barn. After waiting for an hour, he decided to proceed with his repair work, which took approximately 4.5 hours. Later that afternoon, around 3:30 p.m., local farmer Lorenz Schlittenbauer sent his son Johann and stepson Josef to Hinterkaifeck to check on the family. When the boys reported that they had seen no one, Schlittenbauer himself went to the farm, accompanied by Michael Perl and Jakob Siegel. Upon entering the barn, they made a gruesome discovery. The bodies of Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and granddaughter Cecilia, stacked neatly on top of each other, partially covered with hay. Shortly afterward, they found the body of the maid, Maria Baumgartner, in her bedroom, and the body of little Josef in his crib in his mother's bedroom. Inspector Georg Reingruber and his department were assigned to investigate the killings. However, their initial work was significantly hampered by the number of people who had already disturbed the crime scene, moving bodies and items around, and even cooking and eating meals in the kitchen. The day after the discovery, court physician Johann Baptist Aumüller performed autopsies in the barn. He determined that a mattock was the most likely murder weapon, although the weapon itself was not found at the scene during the initial investigation. Particularly disturbing evidence showed that the younger Cecilia had been alive for several hours after the assault. She had torn her hair out in tufts while lying in the straw. The skulls of the victims were removed and sent to Munich for further examination, but were later lost during World War II. Initially suspecting robbery as the motive, police interrogated traveling craftsmen, vagrants, and several inhabitants from surrounding villages. However, they abandoned this theory when a large amount of money was found untouched in the house. This discovery strengthened the bizarre nature of the case. The killer had not been motivated by financial gain. During the farm's demolition in 1923, investigators found what is believed to be the murder weapon, a blood-caked mattock hidden in the attic. A penknife was also discovered buried in hay in the barn, though its significance remains unclear. Several inconsistencies and strange occurrences added to the mystery of the case. In the inspection record, it was noted that the victims were probably drawn to the barn by restlessness resulting in noises from the animals. However, a later test revealed that human screams from the barn could not be heard in the living area. On the night after the crime, 3 days before the bodies were discovered, artisan Michael Plöckel passed by Hinterkaifeck and observed that the oven had been heated. He reported that someone approached him with a lantern and blinded him, causing him to hastily continue on his way. Plöckel also noticed that the smoke from the fireplace had a revolting smell. Strangely, this incident was not thoroughly investigated and no effort was made to determine what had been burned in the oven that night. On April 1st at 3 a.m., farmer and butcher Simon Reislender, while on his way home near Brunnen, saw 2 mysterious figures at the edge of the forest. When these strangers noticed him, they turned away so their faces could not be seen. After learning of the murders, Reislander believed these individuals might have been involved. In mid-May 1927, a stranger reportedly stopped a resident of Weidhofen at midnight, asking questions about the murder before shouting that he was the murderer and then running into the woods. This stranger was never identified. Over the years, numerous suspects have been considered, and various theories have circulated regarding the identity and motive of the killer. Karl Gabriel was the husband of widowed Victoria Gabriel. He had reportedly been killed in December 1914 during World War I by a shell attack in Arras, France, but his body had never been recovered. After the murders, speculation arose about whether Karl had actually died in the war, or if he had somehow survived and returned to murder his family. What gave this theory credence was the fact that Victoria had conceived and given birth to her son Joseph in her husband's absence. The boy was rumored to be the product of an incestuous relationship between Victoria and her father Andreas, which had been documented in court and was known throughout the village. After World War II, German war captives released from Soviet captivity claimed they had been sent home by a German-speaking Soviet officer who claimed to be the Hinterkaifeck murderer. Some theorized this officer might have been Karl Gabriel, as those who claimed to have seen Gabriel after his reported death testified he had wanted to go to Russia. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, one of the men who discovered the bodies, came under early suspicion. Shortly after the death of his first wife in 1918, Schlittenbauer was believed to have had a relationship with Victoria Gabriel and was suspected of being Josep's biological father. Locals became suspicious of Schlittenbauer due to several questionable actions immediately after the discovery of the bodies. When Schlittenbauer and his companions arrived to investigate, they had to break a gate to enter the barn because all doors were locked. However, after finding the 4 bodies in the barn, Schlittenbauer allegedly unlocked the front door of the house with a key and entered alone. A key to the house had gone missing several days before the murders, though it's possible that Schlittenbauer, as a neighbor, or Victoria's potential lover, might have been given a key. When questioned by his companions about why he had entered the house alone when it was unclear if the murderer might still be present, Schlittenbauer allegedly stated that he went to look for his son Joseph. It is known that Schlittenbauer disturbed the bodies at the crime scene, potentially compromising the investigation. For many years, local suspicion remained on Schlittenbauer because of strange comments that seemed to indicate knowledge of details only the killer would know. In 1925, a local teacher discovered Schlittenbauer visiting the remains of the demolished Hinterkaifeck. When asked why he was there, Schlittenbauer stated that the perpetrator's attempt to bury the family's remains in the barn had been hindered by the frozen ground. This statement was interpreted as evidence that Schlittenbauer had intimate knowledge of the ground conditions at the time of the murders. Before his death in 1941, Schlittenbauer conducted and won several civil claims for slander against individuals who described him as the murderer of Hinterkaifeck. In 1951, prosecutor Andreas Popp investigated brothers Adolf and Anton Gump in connection with the Hinterkaifeck murders. Their sister, Crescentia Meyer, claimed on her deathbed that her brothers had committed the murders. Adolf Gump had been listed as a suspect as early as April 9, 1922, due to his connections to the Freikorps Oberland. As a Freikorps member, Gump was said to have participated in the murder of 9 farmers in Upper Silesia during fighting against Polish uprisings in the region. While Anton Gump was temporarily taken into police custody, Adolf had already died in 1944. After a brief investigation, Anton was released, and in 1954, the case against him was officially discontinued due to lack of evidence. Several other suspects were investigated over the years, Karl S. and Andreas S. In 1971, a woman named Therese T. wrote a letter describing an event from her youth where she overheard the mother of brothers Karl and Andreas S. claiming her sons were the Hinterkaifeck murderers. The woman reportedly said Andreas regretted that he lost his penknife, which connected to the penknife found when the farm was demolished. Peter Weber, named as a suspect by Josef Betz, who worked with Weber as a laborer in the winter of 1919-1920. According to Betz, Weber knew details about Hinterkaifeck and had suggested killing Andreas Gruber to obtain the family's money. Bichler brothers and Georg Siegel, the former maid, Crescens Rieger, suspected brothers Anton and Karl Bichler of committing the murders. Anton had helped with the potato harvest at Hinterkaifeck and therefore knew the premises. Rieger reported that the farm dog, which barked at everyone, never barked at Anton. She believed the Bichler brothers may have committed the murder together with Georg Siegel, who had worked at Hinterkaifeck and knew of the family fortune. Thaler brothers also suspected, according to Crescens Rieger, the Thaler brothers had committed several minor burglaries in the area before the crime. Rieger stated that Josef Thaler had stood at her window at night asking questions about the family and claimed to know which family member was sleeping in which room. Paul Mueller. More recently, author Bill James, in his book The Man from the Train, suggested that a man known as Paul Mueller, a German migrant and suspect in numerous family murders in the United States, may have been responsible for the Hinterkaifeck killings. The murders bear similarities to Muller's suspected crimes in America, including the slaughter of entire families in isolated homes, use of the blunt edge of a farm tool as a weapon, moving and stacking bodies of victims, and the absence of robbery as a motive. In 2007, 15 students from the Polizeifachhochschule Police Academy in Fürstenfeldbruck examined the case using modern criminal investigation techniques. In their final report, they confirmed the meticulousness of the original investigation, but criticized the lack of professional forensics, particularly the failure to take fingerprints, which was already common practice at the time. Although the students concluded it was almost certain that the murderers could no longer be identified, all authors of the report independently agreed on who they believed was the main suspect in the case. However, out of consideration for his descendants, they did not publicly name this suspect. The Hinterkaifeck farmstead was completely demolished less than a year after the murders, as the community wanted to remove the reminder of the violence that had occurred there. A small concrete monument known as the Hinterkaifeck Andachtsstätte was erected close to where the farm once stood, serving as a memorial to the victims. The case has remained firmly in German public consciousness through various books, films, documentaries, and exhibitions. More than a century after the killings took place, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most infamous unsolved crimes, continuing to fascinate criminologists, historians, and true crime enthusiasts around the world. The combination of the brutal nature of the killings, the strange occurrences before the murders, the killer's bizarre decision to remain at the farm afterward, and the failure to identify the perpetrator despite extensive investigation, has cemented the case's place in criminal history. The mystery of who killed the Gruber-Gabriel family and their maid, and why, remains unsolved to this day. A chilling reminder of a horrific crime that has defied explanation for generations.